The Arizona Territory baked beneath the relentless summer sun in the year 1882. The endless desert shimmered beneath waves of heat, while towering red mesas watched silently over scattered ranches and lonely trails. Life here was never easy. Water was precious, trust even rarer, and survival often depended on the strength of a person's will. Emma Whitfield had learned that lesson far too young. Only 20 years old, she stood alone outside the weathered ranch house her father had built with his own hands. Once, laughter had filled the little home. Her mother had tended a garden beside the porch, and her father had dreamed that one day Emma would inherit a prosperous ranch. But dreams had withered under the cruel hand of fate. A fever swept through the valley 2 years earlier, taking both her parents within a week. Since then, every sunrise had brought another struggle. She repaired broken fences herself. She branded cattle herself. She hauled water from the spring herself. That spring was the only reliable source of fresh water for miles. And that was exactly why powerful cattle baron Silas Granger wanted her land. Granger already controlled thousands of acres across the territory. Wealth, influence, and fear followed him wherever he rode. The sheriff shared whiskey with him. The county judge accepted his donations. Ranchers who opposed him often found their cattle missing or their barns mysteriously burned. Emma refused to sell. Her father had died protecting that ranch. She would not surrender it without a fight. One dusty afternoon, Granger arrived with 6 armed riders. Their expensive saddles gleamed beneath the sunlight, while Emma's old workhorse nervously pawed the ground. Granger removed his hat with an exaggerated smile. "Miss Whitfield," he said smoothly, "I've come with one last generous offer." Emma folded her arms. "You've already heard my answer." His smile faded. "I'd hate to see accidents happen. They already have." He glanced toward her nearly empty cattle pen. Things can always become worse. Without waiting for another response, Granger tipped his hat and rode away, leaving thick clouds of dust hanging in the hot air. Emma watched until they disappeared beyond the hills. For the first time in months, fear settled deep inside her heart. 3 days later, she loaded supplies into her wagon and headed toward the trading post nearly 30 miles away. She hoped to sell hides, buy flour, and perhaps speak with a lawyer willing to challenge Granger's forged claims. The canyon road seemed unusually quiet. Too quiet. Halfway through the narrow pass, 4 armed riders emerged from behind towering rocks. Granger's men. Their rifles rested casually across their saddles. One grinned. "Afternoon, Miss Whitfield." Another reached for the wagon reins. "I reckon that land deed would look safer in our hands." Emma grabbed the shotgun beneath the driver's seat. Before she could raise it, another rider aimed his revolver directly at her. "Don't." Her hands trembled. A sharp whistle sliced through the canyon. An arrow struck the dirt, inches from the gunman's horse. The frightened animal reared violently. Another arrow buried itself beside a second rider. The outlaws spun in panic. High above them, silent figures appeared along the canyon cliffs. Apache warriors. Nearly a dozen, every bow already drawn. The leader rode slowly down a narrow trail carved into the stone. His dark horse moved with calm confidence. Unlike the others, he carried no raised weapon. He didn't need one. His presence alone changed everything. His long black hair was tied behind his shoulders with leather strips decorated in turquoise beads. His weathered buckskin clothing blended almost perfectly with the canyon itself. A rifle rested across his saddle, though his hand never touched it. His face remained completely unreadable. This was Nantan Kai, the feared Apache warrior, the man newspapers called the Ghost of Red Canyon. Stories claimed he had killed dozens of soldiers. Others insisted entire posses had vanished after pursuing him. Some believed he possessed supernatural powers, that allowed him to disappear into the desert. Emma had grown up hearing those stories. Now he sat only 20 feet away. Granger's men recognized him immediately. Fear replaced every ounce of confidence. The largest outlaw slowly lowered his pistol. "We're leaving." Kai spoke only 4 words. "You already stayed too long." His voice was calm, almost gentle, yet none of the men questioned him. Within seconds, they turned their horses and fled through the canyon. Silence returned. Emma remained frozen. Kai dismounted without looking directly at her. The attack had scattered supplies across the rocky ground. Without speaking, he gathered sacks of flour, picked up her father's old rifle, and carefully placed everything back into the wagon. He even retrieved the leather folder containing her ranch deed. When he finally approached, Emma instinctively stepped backward. Instead of threatening her, he simply extended the folder. She accepted it carefully. "Thank you," she whispered. Kai nodded once. Then he noticed fresh blood running down her arm, where she'd scraped herself against the wagon wheel. Without asking permission, he removed a small pouch from his belt. Inside were crushed herbs. He mixed them with water from his canteen, and gently spread the medicine across the cut. "It will keep infection away," he said quietly. Emma stared at him. This wasn't the monster she'd imagined. When he finished, he stepped away. "You should travel before dark." Then he mounted his horse. Within moments, he and every Apache rider disappeared into the maze of red cliffs as silently as they had arrived. Emma remained standing beside the wagon for several minutes. She realized something impossible. The most feared man in Arizona had shown her more kindness than most of her own neighbors. Weeks passed. Rumors spread quickly through nearby settlements. Some claimed Kai had raided another military supply train. Others insisted he'd stolen cattle from wealthy ranchers. But Emma began noticing strange details that contradicted every frightening story. An elderly shepherd whose wagon had broken an axle quietly admitted that an Apache warrior repaired it before dawn. A widow discovered fresh venison hanging outside her cabin after her husband died. A frightened little boy wandered away during a dust storm, but somehow returned safely home after saying, "A man with long braids carried me." None dared say Kai's name publicly. But Emma knew. One evening she saw him again. This time beside the spring on her own property. Instead of confronting him, she watched from behind cottonwood trees. Kai wasn't taking water. He was repairing stones around the spring where cattle had damaged the bank. Protecting it. When he finally noticed her, neither reached for a weapon. "You help strangers," Emma said softly. "They are people. They're the same people who fear you." Kai looked toward the fading sunset. Fear grows faster than truth. His answer lingered in Emma's mind long after he disappeared once more. Meanwhile, Silas Granger prepared his final move. He bribed the county clerk into producing forged ownership papers. The sheriff announced deputies would arrive within a week to remove Emma from her ranch by force. She rode into town searching desperately for help. No lawyer would oppose Granger. No rancher dared testify. Even old friends avoided meeting her eyes. That evening, as despair settled over the valley, an elderly Apache woman quietly approached Emma outside the trading post. "I know who you are," the woman said. Emma nodded cautiously. "You know Kai?" The woman smiled faintly. "I helped raise him." She explained that soldiers had discovered signs leading toward the hidden Apache Valley. Within weeks, perhaps days, another military campaign would begin. Both Emma and Kai stood on the edge of losing everything. Then the old woman spoke of an ancient custom remembered by both Apache elders and several neighboring frontier communities. A sacred marriage between two people from opposing worlds could create an alliance respected by many tribal leaders and local settlements alike. It would not erase hatred, but it would force others to think twice before attacking either side. Emma barely slept that night. The idea sounded impossible. Marry the man everyone feared? A man she barely knew? Yet every memory contradicted the terrifying legends. He protected children, he helped widows, he saved strangers, he asked for nothing. Days later, representatives from nearby ranches, army officers, merchants, and tribal messengers gathered at the trading post to negotiate growing violence across the territory. Voices rose, accusations filled the room, Granger mocked the Apache people, soldiers demanded harsher action. The meeting dissolved into shouting. Then Emma stood. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Ignoring every stare, she crossed the crowded room, straight toward Kai. He stood silently near the doorway, watching everyone without speaking. When she stopped before him, even the arguments behind them faded into complete silence. Every eye followed her. Taking a deep breath, Emma looked directly into his calm, dark eyes. "I want to marry you." Through the hall, someone dropped a coffee mug. Granger burst into loud, mocking laughter. Even the soldiers looked stunned. No one believed what they had just heard. All eyes turned toward the feared Apache warrior. Would he reject her? Would he walk away? Or would he answer in a way no one expected? His expression never changed, as he slowly lifted his gaze to meet hers. The silence inside the trading post stretched so long that even the creaking wooden beams seemed louder than breathing. More than 50 people stood frozen where they were. Cowboys still gripped coffee mugs halfway to their lips. Soldiers rested their hands on revolvers without realizing it. Traders exchanged bewildered glances. Even Silas Granger, who had laughed at Emma's bold proposal only moments before, slowly stopped smiling. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on Nantan Kai. Emma could hear her own heartbeat. She knew everyone expected Kai to reject her. Many believed he might consider her proposal an insult. Others feared violence would erupt before another word was spoken. Kai studied Emma for several seconds. His face betrayed no emotion. Finally he spoke. "I will not marry you." The words struck Emma like a physical blow. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Granger threw back his head and laughed loudly. "I told you," he shouted. "Even the Apache doesn't want a desperate ranch girl." Several men joined his laughter. Emma lowered her eyes, humiliation burning across her face. She had prepared herself for many possibilities, but hearing Kai refuse her in front of the entire town hurt far more than she expected. She turned to leave. Then Kai spoke again. "I will not marry you," he repeated calmly, "if your reason is fear." The room fell silent once more. Emma stopped walking. Kai stepped forward. "If you ask because you think I can save your ranch, the answer is no." He looked around the crowded room. "If you ask because you believe I owe you something, the answer is no." His gaze returned to Emma. "If you ask because everyone has abandoned you—" He paused. "Then, you are asking the wrong man." Confusion spread across the faces of everyone watching. Emma slowly turned back toward him. Kai continued quietly. "Marriage is not protection. It is trust. It is choosing someone even after the danger has passed." His words carried none of the harshness people expected from the feared Apache warrior. Instead, they sounded almost sorrowful. Emma swallowed hard. "I know." "No," Kai answered gently. "You know desperation." For a long moment neither spoke. Then Emma surprised everyone again. She stepped closer. "I was desperate when I first thought about asking you." She took a shaky breath. "But that's not why I'm standing here now." The room became perfectly still. She looked directly into his eyes. "You could have taken my land. You didn't. You could have left me in that canyon. You didn't. You could have let Granger destroy my life. You didn't." Her voice steadied. "I've watched people call you a monster while you secretly helped widows, children, and strangers." She smiled sadly. "The people who claim to be civilized showed me less kindness than the man they fear most." Kai remained silent. Emma continued. "I don't know whether this marriage would save my ranch. I don't even know whether we'll survive the next month. But I know the kind of man you are. The trading post was so quiet that the crackling fireplace could be heard across the room. Kai slowly lowered his eyes. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. Few people had ever questioned him. No one had ever seen through him, especially not someone from the settlements. Silas Granger stepped forward angrily. "This is ridiculous." He jabbed a finger toward Kai. "He's an outlaw. He's responsible for raids across this territory." Kai calmly met his stare. "So are you." Several ranchers looked away uncomfortably. Granger's smile disappeared. "You accuse me?" Kai answered without raising his voice. "I accuse no one. I remember." The words carried enormous weight. Old ranchers exchanged nervous glances. Many knew Granger had grown rich by forcing smaller landowners from their property. None had dared challenge him publicly. Until now. Granger reached for his revolver. Several soldiers instantly stepped between the two men. The commanding officer raised a hand. "Enough." The meeting dissolved shortly afterward. No agreement was reached. But one thing had changed forever. The settlers had seen the feared Apache refuse violence even while being insulted. As Emma prepared to leave, Kai approached quietly outside, beneath the fading evening sky. "You embarrassed yourself today." Emma sighed. "I know." AI shook his head. "You embarrass the people who judge before seeing." She looked up. "Then why refuse?" Kai stared toward the distant mountains. "My father loved a woman from another tribe." Emma listened silently. "They believed love would be enough. It wasn't." He closed his eyes briefly. "When war came," his voice grew quieter, "both families died." Emma realized she was hearing something Kai had likely never shared with an outsider. "I buried them myself." The pain in those simple words lingered between them. "I will not lead someone into the same future." Emma stepped closer. "You don't decide my future." Kai finally looked directly at her. "You should." She smiled softly. "I already did." Without another word, she climbed into her wagon and drove away. Kai remained standing in the road until darkness swallowed the trail. Days passed. Neither saw the other. Emma focused on preparing for the sheriff's arrival. She repaired the barn roof, stacked firewood, packed important belongings in case she was forced to leave. Each evening she found herself wondering whether Kai had already forgotten the conversation. Then strange things began happening. A broken fence she hadn't repaired somehow stood perfectly rebuilt by sunrise. Fresh horseshoe tracks appeared near her pasture. Someone left cured venison hanging beside her smokehouse. No one admitted seeing who had done it. Emma smiled. She suspected the truth. High in the mountains, Kai faced problems of his own. Apache scouts reported soldiers moving closer every day. Families began hiding supplies inside caves. Children practiced emergency escape routes. The elders gathered around the evening fire. Gray Wolf, the oldest among them, watched Kai carefully. "You care for the ranch woman." Kai didn't answer. Silence was answer enough. Another elder sighed. "Our people have survived because we remember who we are." Kai nodded. "I know." Gray Wolf leaned forward. "And who are you?" The question lingered. For years Kai had believed his duty required complete sacrifice. No wife, no family, no personal happiness, only responsibility. But Emma's courage had unsettled beliefs he'd carried since childhood. That night he walked alone beneath countless stars. His mother's words returned from long ago. A leader who fears love becomes as lonely as the mountain. Only now did he fully understand. Meanwhile, Silas Granger grew increasingly furious. He slammed a whiskey bottle against his office wall. "I should have killed that Apache years ago." His foreman shifted uneasily. "The town's talking." "About what?" "They say Kai spared those men in the canyon. They say he helps folks." Granger's expression darkened. Then we'll remind everyone who he really is. He unfolded a map. His finger rested on Emma's ranch. If I can't scare her away, his finger moved toward the Apache Mountains. I'll make sure she watches him die. He secretly arranged a meeting with corrupt army scouts. Using forged reports, he claimed Kai's band planned a massive attack on nearby settlements. Within 3 days, nearly 50 cavalry soldiers prepared to ride into the mountains. War was coming. Emma learned of the soldiers by accident. While delivering supplies to town, she overheard 2 officers discussing the coming campaign. They'll surround the valley before sunrise. No Apache will escape. Her blood turned cold. She knew exactly where Kai's people were hiding. She raced home, saddled her fastest horse, and galloped toward the mountains without stopping. Branches whipped across her face. Dust filled her lungs. The trail became steeper. Night slowly settled over the desert. Hours later, she reached a narrow canyon, where a lone Apache scout stepped into her path with bow raised. I must see Kai. The scout hesitated. It's about the soldiers. Moments later, Kai appeared. One look at Emma's exhausted face told him everything. They're coming, she gasped. 50 cavalry. They know where your families are. Kai closed his eyes briefly. There was no surprise in his expression. Only quiet acceptance. I expected this day. Emma grabbed his arm. No, we still have time. We can move everyone. Kai looked toward the dark valley where dozens of children slept peacefully. We cannot move the elderly fast enough. Emma refused to accept defeat. There has to be another way. Kai looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time since they met, he gently took both of her hands. If you truly meant what you said. Emma nodded before he finished. I did. Kai's voice was barely above a whisper. Then when this is over, ask me again. A faint smile appeared on his face. Ask me again. Emma's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, hope shone between them. But neither realized that hidden high among the rocks, one of Granger's paid spies had witnessed everything. He quietly mounted his horse and rode hard toward the army camp. By dawn, both the soldiers and Silas Granger would know exactly where Kai and his people were hiding, and the battle that would decide all of their futures was about to begin. The first pale light of dawn crept across the Arizona mountains, painting the towering cliffs in shades of gold and crimson. Normally, the hidden Apache Valley awakened peacefully. Children chased one another between cottonwood trees. Women prepared morning meals over small fires, and elders greeted the rising sun with quiet prayers. But this morning, an uneasy silence hung over the valley. Nantan Kai stood on a rocky overlook, watching the eastern horizon. The cool desert wind carried a sound that made his expression harden. Horse hooves. Many of them. Emma Whitfield climbed beside him, breathing heavily after the steep ascent. She had remained in the valley through the night, despite Kai's insistence that she return home. You should leave, he had told her several times. I've already chosen where I belong, she answered each time. Now, standing beside him, she heard the distant thunder of cavalry horses. They're here, she whispered. Kai nodded once. They came sooner than expected. An Apache scout appeared from the trees, his face grim. Soldiers from the east. How many? Nearly 50. Another scout arrived moments later. More riders from the south. Kai understood immediately. They were surrounded. The spy had done his work well. Instead of panicking, Kai calmly gathered the tribal elders beneath the largest cottonwood tree in the valley. Gray Wolf, White Feather, and the other respected leaders formed a circle while families waited anxiously nearby. We cannot fight a battle here, Kai said quietly. Our children would be trapped. Gray Wolf nodded. The Western Pass? Kai shook his head. Already blocked. Silence settled over the group. Emma listened carefully. She had spent enough time on her father's ranch to know the surrounding terrain better than most soldiers. Suddenly an idea struck her. There is another way. Everyone looked toward her. She knelt and began drawing a rough map in the dirt with a stick. My father used an old mining trail years ago. She traced a narrow line through the mountains. The entrance collapsed decades ago. The army won't know it exists. Kai studied the drawing. It leads where? North, Emma replied. To the old canyon beyond Black Mesa. One elder frowned. The trail is dangerous. Emma nodded. But children can pass through. The cavalry cannot. Kai looked at Grey Wolf. The old leader smiled. The Great Spirit sometimes sends wisdom from unexpected places. Kai immediately began giving orders. The strongest warriors would guide the women, children, and elders through the abandoned mining trail, while a small group remained behind to delay the soldiers. Emma realized what that meant. You plan to stay. Kai met her eyes. They must have time. No, she stepped closer. There has to be another way. If I leave with everyone. He looked toward the approaching dust clouds. They will chase us. If I stay. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Emma understood. He intended to sacrifice himself. Within minutes, the valley became a whirlwind of organized movement. Children gathered blankets and food. Mothers carried infants. Elders leaned on walking sticks. Despite the fear, no one screamed, no one pushed. Kai's people had endured hardship before. They moved with remarkable discipline. Emma helped an elderly Apache woman onto a mule. The woman gently squeezed her hand. You brought hope here. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I pray it is enough. Far below, Captain Robert Hayes led the cavalry toward the hidden valley. Unlike many officers, Hayes was not a cruel man. He disliked the mission. The reports claimed Kai planned an attack on nearby settlements, yet something about the information felt wrong. Still, orders were orders. Beside him rode Silas Granger. His expensive coat and polished boots looked strangely out of place among dusty soldiers. Granger smiled as smoke from the Apache camp became visible. There. I told you. The outlaw hides his army. Hayes studied the valley through binoculars. Instead of warriors preparing for battle, he saw women carrying children, old men, families. His expression darkened. This doesn't look like a war camp. Granger quickly interrupted. They hide behind civilians. Hayes remained silent. Doubt continued growing inside him. High above the valley, Kai and 20 Apache warriors waited among towering rocks. Each knew the mission. Delay the soldiers. Nothing more. No unnecessary bloodshed. No revenge. Simply buy time. Kai turned toward his warriors. If anyone can escape, go. No one dies for pride. Every warrior nodded. Then they disappeared among the cliffs. The first shots echoed across the canyon. Soldiers scattered for cover as carefully aimed rifle fire struck rocks just ahead of them. Kai intentionally aimed to stop their advance, rather than kill. Captain Hayes quickly noticed. They're warning us. Granger shouted angrily. Charge! Hayes ignored him. Instead, he ordered his men to advance cautiously. The battle became a strange contest. Apache warriors constantly shifted positions, creating the illusion of a much larger force. Rolling boulders blocked narrow trails. Small rock slides forced cavalry horses to stop repeatedly. Hours passed. Every minute allowed more Apache families to move farther through the hidden mining trail. Emma watched from a ridge near the escape route. She desperately wanted to help Kai, but knew protecting the children mattered more. She couldn't ignore the growing sounds of gunfire. By midday, Granger lost patience. He secretly gathered several hired gunmen who had joined the expedition pretending to be scouts. Forget the captain's orders. He pointed toward the northern ridge. Kai is up there. Shoot him. The gunman slipped away unnoticed. Kai had just finished helping one of his wounded warriors reach safety when he sensed movement behind him. Too late. A rifle cracked. Pain exploded across his shoulder. He stumbled against a boulder. Another bullet struck the rock inches from his head. These shots came from behind, not the soldiers below. Granger's men. Kai quickly rolled behind cover. 3 gunmen climbed toward him through the rocks. "Big reward today," one shouted. Kai calmly reloaded his rifle. Despite his injured shoulder, he refused to retreat. If the gunmen reached the ridge, they would discover the escaping families. He couldn't allow that. Emma heard the unfamiliar gunfire echoing from above. Something felt wrong. Without hesitation, she mounted her horse. Ignoring shouted warnings, she raced toward the upper ridge. Branches tore at her sleeves. Loose stones slid beneath the horse's hooves. Finally, she reached the rocky summit. What she saw made her heart stop. Kai stood alone behind a boulder. 3 gunmen surrounded him from different directions. One raised his rifle. Emma didn't think. She acted. Grabbing her father's old Winchester from the saddle, she fired. The bullet struck the gunman's rifle, knocking it from his hands. Everyone froze. The second outlaw turned toward her. "You stupid girl." He fired. Emma barely ducked. Kai seized the opportunity. In seconds, he disarmed the remaining attackers without killing them. 2 fled downhill. The third surrendered immediately. Emma climbed from her horse, her hands shaking. Kai looked at her injured arm, where a bullet had grazed her sleeve. "I told you to leave." She smiled weakly. "And miss all the excitement?" For the first time, Kai laughed. A genuine laugh. Short, quiet, but real. Emma stared in surprise. "I wasn't sure you knew how." "Neither was I." Below them, Captain Hayes finally reached the abandoned Apache camp. He dismounted slowly. Empty cooking fires, children's toys, blankets, no army, only the remains of families forced to flee. He turned toward Granger. "You lied." Granger's face tightened. "They escaped. Because of him." Hayes looked directly at him. "No, because someone wanted this war." Before Granger could answer, one of the captured gunmen was brought downhill under Apache guard. Terrified, the man confessed everything. Granger had forged reports. Granger hired spies. Granger ordered assassins to kill Kai. The soldiers stood in stunned silence. Captain Hayes slowly removed his gloves. Then he ordered 2 cavalrymen forward. "Arrest Silas Granger." Granger exploded in rage. "You can't. I own half this territory." Hayes answered coldly. "You don't own justice." Granger attempted to flee. He never made it 10 yards before. Soldiers tackled him to the ground. The man who had terrorized the valley for years was finally defeated, not by violence, but by the truth. Several days later, peace slowly returned. The Apache family safely reached a new hidden valley beyond Black Mesa. Captain Hayes officially reported that no planned Apache attack had ever existed. The government bounty on Kai quietly disappeared. Many settlers who had once feared him began questioning everything they had believed. Emma stood beside a small stream, where she had first met Kai weeks earlier. He approached quietly. His wounded shoulder remained bandaged. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma smiled. "I believe I asked you something once." Kai smiled back. "You did." She folded her arms playfully. "I'm asking again. Nantan Kai, will you marry me?" This time there was no crowd, no soldiers, no fear. Only 2 people, standing beneath the wide Arizona sky. Kai reached into a small leather pouch and removed a hand-carved turquoise pendant shaped like an eagle. He gently placed it in Emma's hand. "In my people's tradition," he said softly, An eagle flies beside only one companion for life. He looked into her eyes. I cannot promise you an easy future. I cannot promise riches. I cannot promise there will never be hardship. He smiled. But I promise, you will never stand alone again. Tears filled Emma's eyes. Is that your answer? Kai gently took both her hands. My answer is yes. Months later, their wedding brought together people who once believed they could never stand side by side. Apache elders blessed the union according to their traditions, while neighboring settlers offered gifts of horses, blankets, and tools. Captain Hayes attended in plain clothes, honoring peace instead of war. Many who had once whispered Kai's name in fear now saw the truth. Courage was not measured by how fiercely a man fought, but by how faithfully he protected those who could not protect themselves. Years afterward, travelers crossing the Arizona Territory told a different story than the old legends. They no longer spoke of a feared Apache warrior who terrified the frontier. Instead, they told of the brave woman who had dared to ask him to marry her, and of the man whose unexpected answer changed not only her life, but the hearts of everyone who witnessed it.